What do you think the biggest opportunities over the next 5 or 10 years are going to be for both buyers and sellers? Like, do you see any trends that are any different than the past, or where do you see this industry going in general?
I think it's going to continue to grow. There's so many people, just demographics, retiring that happen to own businesses. It's not going to slow down. The real opportunity is really what we've already talked about. Buying at a responsible debt level in an industry you know, and building systems, process, procedure to kind of work yourself out of it, and then buying it, doing it again, and having multiple businesses. You just can't do it overnight. Or the model we just barely talked about, where if you have a bunch of capital, you're fronting the down payment, you're having someone else be the owner, operator, and the personal guarantor of the business, and having multiple businesses.
Does that appeal to you as an investor?
You know what?
All right, guys, we're here with Trent Lee. We're going to talk all things business ownership, and we're talking to somebody who is, for like 7 years in a row, something like that, has sold more units in business brokerage than anybody else. So that means you're doing a ton of volume. You've seen a lot of deals. Yep. You've seen a lot of buyers, seen a lot of sellers, seen a lot of deals probably fall out because it's the nature of the beast. And you're here in Las Vegas with me, so that's pretty awesome. So this show is going to be awesome because everybody out there watching right now, there's so many aspiring business owners. You know, people like Cody Sanchez where buying a laundromat is this new sexy thing, and laundromats valuations, I heard, are like through the roof now, and people are overpaying. Exactly. But you're actually in the trenches, and I'm on the other side, on the SBA loan side, so I see a lot of things there. Business brokerage actually was always appealing to me. Like, I thought about, hey, would this be a good industry for me to get in? But it seems pretty challenging.
It can be, yeah, absolutely. You have to know a lot. You got to know financials. You got to act sort of like a quasi CPA to read and understand financials. You got to have a little bit of a legal background to draft contracts, or at least fill in a templated. You got to know marketing, negotiation, sales. Right? It's not something that people get into right out of college.
So let's rewind. I would imagine that you went to like a good school. You seem like a smart guy. Parents, probably were smart people too. And you graduated college. Then it doesn't have to be a long story, but I read somewhere where you actually owned 2 or 3 businesses, then you exited out, and then you got into business brokerage. Just can you tell me that story a little bit? The viewers would probably find it interesting how you got into this industry.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick backstory. So I grew up here in town. My father was an entrepreneur. He had multiple businesses. He had one really good-sized business. Depending on the time of the year, between 500 to 700 employees here in town. I was the oldest. That was like my ticket to easy life, right? I was supposed to take that over. When I was a senior in high school, at the time, I didn't know this at the time, it was a private equity group that came in and said, hey, we're interested in buying your business. And he said, no thanks, this is a fantastic lifestyle that we had. Really had no interest selling it, but just out of curiosity, he said, make him an offer. And they did. And as soon as he saw their offer, he said, tell me where to sign. So that was it. It was sold. And now here's the interesting part. Part of the reason I bring it up, because now that I'm in the industry, I don't see this very often. My dad had taken us along, me and my younger brother, through that transaction. We went to a lot of those meetings with the private equity group, the due diligence CPA. We went out to California for a tax strategist with someone that was helping from tax planning. He took us along that process, that journey, which really intrigued both me and my brother. Then, as you say, went to college, started a couple of businesses, and some of them did okay, some of them crashed and burned. I didn't get up to the size my father had, but I had one. I sold this in 2012, about 90 employees. That was the second one that we'd gone through. And by then, I'd gone through the process enough that I had the background, had some education, had some experience, real-world experience, operating businesses, exiting from businesses. By then, I'd gone through the process that I was so unimpressed with the business brokers that I met with that I, kind of always in the back of my mind thought, you know what, I really kind of liked this business brokering thing that my dad, back when he sold his business, introduced us to. And I thought, I think I can do a better job than those guys in the market. And so the idea, and I didn't, this was nothing more than a theory at the time, but the idea was to take like the professionalism of what happens in M&A space, like the mid-market, lower mid-market space, the professionalism of how to treat clients, how to value businesses, building the pitch decks, the outreach, the systems, the automation, something that is done by the lower middle market that wasn't being done in the business broker. It was a very old school, gray hair, kind of like old man industry. No one, and still to this day, honestly, it's like 10 years behind real estate. Some business brokers don't even have a basic CRM in place. They're behind the times. But the point was, I wanted to take like the professionalism of the M&A space and apply it to Main Street businesses. And that was the idea at the time, and that's worked really well. To your point, I've sold at this point over 600 transactions in mostly the Main Street space, but I've tried to take the professionalism, the pitch deck, the valuation, the systems, the CRM, the outreach, the automation, incorporating AI, and apply it to the Main Street business space. And I found a great little niche there.
I remember I closed a loan for this $10 million business acquisition. I saw the business broker's commission on that. I was like, whoa, like myself and the banker were looking at, hey, this is, but the truth is though, I don't know if this study is accurate, but somewhere around 10 to 14% of all listed businesses actually sell. Is that kind of what you guys see in the industry across the board?
I've never seen any like official study, but it's low for sure. And partially it's because, there's really kind of two parties at fault here. One, the business broker who mispriced it to begin with and took a business to market that was so unreasonably priced. It doesn't meet basic market multiples and DSCR and all that type of stuff, which we can talk about. Those are never going to sell. They're doomed to begin with, just because of the bad business broker. The other ones, maybe the seller built themselves a business that's fairly dependent on them and is going to be a challenge to sell. So, but you're right. A lot of these are not going to sell.
So being a good business broker means having realistic conversations with sellers, really, and saying, look, if you want it to sell, I know we all have this wish number, but it's really going to sell around here, and it's really probably going to you're going to have to carry some of the sale. You're going to have to carry a note. Mm-hmm. When I was in real estate, seller carrying notes were not as common. In business acquisition, it looks like from the SBA side, I'm always seeing some sort of seller carryback on them to make the numbers work, whether it be on standby or just some sort of note.
Yeah, I think a big part of what a broker does or should be doing is setting realistic expectations, right? And part of what I did, because I knew there were some, frankly, bad business brokers out there, at least the ones that I met, that I wasn't very impressed with. I wanted to make sure I wasn't repeating and following in the same traps as some of the mistakes they were doing. And so at the very beginning, I went and got certified to do business appraisals so that I could properly value and I understand appraisal work. I also went through as an SBA underwriter, not because I want to underwrite my own deals. I just want to better understand how to underwrite my own listings that I take to market so they're valued appropriately. I build out my own credit memo before I even take it. I run through DSCR. I factor in the buyer's livable wage. We're talking about, again, what I mentioned before, a business broker should be setting that expectation. I'm walking the seller through realistic expectations of just because they need $2 million to retire doesn't have any bearing on what their business actually sells for. And so we'll talk about price, but we'll also talk about deal structure. And that's where valuations, SBA underwriting comes in, because it's not just price alone, it's structuring the deal. Both of them have to align to really make a business that is marketable and sellable in the real market out there.
And also, sometimes the seller, this is their biggest nest egg. They don't want to, get all the proceeds at the end. They want it over time for tax purposes. So you're basically educating them on the whole process, which gives them confidence. So when you got started early on in your business brokerage career, and you didn't have hundreds of deals under your belt. How did you, was it the fact that you went in and started taking this approach of like learning SBA underwriting and all these things? So when you went into your first appointment, seller appointment, you had the confidence, right? Because it's a learning curve. You had businesses. It seems like most good business brokers had prior experience owning businesses, and they understand, they see. But then now you're the actual business broker, and to like, you actually need to have multiple skill sets to be really good. Like you were talking about, SBA guidelines, DSCR, underwriting, all this stuff. And that's probably why a lot of business brokers fail, because they don't have that full piece. They think it just, hey, let's get a listing and, throw out the marketing brochure and put it on Biz Buy Sell and see. Because you guys have to field, I would imagine, a lot of inquiries on your listings.
Absolutely.
And so you're able to sell all these businesses with just yourself and one person. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I use a lot of technology, a lot of systems, processes, automations, and CRMs, and so it's just me and an assistant. But back to you brought up another point that I just want to touch on. That was really a big part of my worry when I first got into the industry, is how do I have the credibility? Obviously, I had an accounting undergraduate, started my master's of finance at Harvard, later transferred to Texas A&M into the MBA program. I'd gone through and sold 2 of my own businesses like we talked about. So there was some built-in credibility there. But one thing that I did, as I mentioned before I even sold my first business, I went through and got certified as a business appraiser to build that credibility so that I could walk into my first deal, my second deal. Maybe I didn't know the process from start to finish because I hadn't yet experienced it, but I at least had enough credibility to properly value it and to go, and I've gone through the transaction myself a couple of times, that I could know emotionally what the sellers were experiencing, what was important to them, and guide them through that. But that credibility, that's why it's so hard to start off, because someone graduating out of college, even if they went to a great school, just doesn't have the credibility of the real world experience to really guide someone. 24-year-old is not going to have the credibility guiding someone that's 65, that's putting their entire retirement in the hands of this 24-year-old to sell the business for maximum value and fund their retirement.
You probably get a ton of calls or inquiries from buyers, right? And the difference between real estate and business brokerage is, one is business brokerage is, there's no MLS unless you go to Florida. There's some kind of, right? It's more fragmented. You might never see some of these deals. And so then you have these buyers, and they're just probably hound you like day in and day out. And how do you actually, what's the process to vet them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So first off, there are the buyers that, to your point, hound you. They get, the squeaky wheel gets a little bit more attention. It's the buyers who send something out that I hear from once, and they send it to me from, this isn't a real email address, but, bunny687@hotmail.com. And there's no signature on there. Essentially, I'm judging a book by its cover, looking at their first outreach. How professional do these guys look? Do they speak the lingo when they call? Do they even know what recast is? Do they know what EBITDA versus SDE is? Do they know what add backs are? Do they know what DSCR is? A lot of times these first-time buyers don't have the foggiest idea. And so that, not to say that they're bad or they're unqualified, but you can tell they haven't really put in the time to properly understand what they're getting into. And so looking professional makes a big difference. Have they been pre-qualified with someone? Are they approaching me with a background, proof of funds, a pre-qualification letter, a buy box? And I know that's super trendy right now to talk about the buy box. What I always tell my buyers is, just as important as the buy box is, the buyer box is just as important. So it's great you want a business that's been around for 10 years, that has these margins, and the seller's retiring, that's the reason, or whatever the buy box is. But if you're not the right buyer, it doesn't matter how great your buy box is. if you're not a good fit as the buyer, the new owner operator, the buy box is worthless. The buyer box is just as important. And so sometimes these sellers approach me and they have no idea what any of that means, or they haven't thought about it. They use this phrase that actually kind of drives me crazy. They say, I'm industry agnostic. I want to buy anything that makes money. Well, like we were talking about before, just because like I have a water restoration business for sale, nets $1 million a year, clean. Tax returns look solid. Well, someone who doesn't have any experience in that space and can't get the contractor license for at least this state where one's required, yeah, it might meet the buy box, but the buyer box is just as important. They don't have the background, the experience. They're not going to get funding approved from a lender. So all of those things factor in when they reach out to me, because I am kind of judging how they look, how they sound, how are they approaching me? Does their email address look, credible? Does their LinkedIn profile look credible? So we're looking at all of that to determine who's a real serious buyer out there. Because to your point, we got to go through hundreds of these until we find the right one.
Yeah, and then you got to go through the LOI stage and the dancing, and a lot of the times that ends up falling out.
Yeah.
I mean, so business brokerage can be extremely lucrative, but it's also probably one of the hardest businesses to get good at doing, right? Like,
yeah, I tell people, look, don't even think about getting into the industry. One, until you have the basic experience like we talked about, but you need to have 12 to 18 months runway of being able to go with no income at all and be able to still support your family and not get desperate to do anything stupid along the way.
I'm going back to what industry, that last business you grew and you exited with like 90 employees, what sector was that in? I'm just curious.
Yeah, totally outside of anything to do with what I do now. We had a contract with, do you remember the old company where the lady falls down and says, help, I fall and I can't get up? We had a contract with LifeWatch. And so they did all the back end fulfillment, the monitoring of the service, and we did the West Coast sales. It was a call center.
Wow.
Yeah, totally unrelated.
Did you bootstrap that business?
No, actually ended up buying it. Much smaller, then we grew it, got that contract, changed the business a little bit, and it didn't take me long to realize that business wasn't for me. I didn't love it. Besides that, there's not a lot of inherent value to a call center anyway. So luckily I was able to get out on good terms and pivot over to something I love doing now.
And so you've been a business broker since 2000?
Yeah, about 2012.
Okay, so how long is that? 14 years?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, wow, good amount of time.
Yeah. It started off a little bit slower because I had other businesses at the time, and I didn't really get into it full time until a little bit later.
Yeah, that's still you've been around the block. What changes have you seen over the years, if any? Is it pretty much the same thing as you started? Is there any new things or new things that you see, a lot of strategies that are working that might be different? Do you believe that there can be a successful buy-side advisor in the equation, or is that all smoke and mirrors?
Really? So there's a couple questions in there that we should talk about. So what have I seen that has changed? It is very much more, and you know this, very much more popular than it used to be to buy an existing profitable business rather than like what was cool was the startup, 10 years ago. Which I 100% agree. The startup it's a grind. It's hard. It's risky versus buying a profitable established business. It's got all the history. So that has changed. What I think has probably not changed but has caught on is the whole buy a business with no money down, buy a business out of state, buy a business absentee. I think that's one of the biggest disservices that some of these social media gurus are putting out there. They make it sound like it's so easy, and whatever it happens to be, a laundromat or whoever's touting some type of a buy this absentee business and it just prints cash and you buy all these businesses and let someone else run them. Man, that is I think that's personally a recipe for a disaster unless you have experience in the industry that you're buying the business to begin with. And if you think about it, some of these people who say, leverage it, buy 100% financing, said another way, you're you're buying 100% financing, or you're going in and leveraging yourself to the hilt with the debt. One wrong move, you have a lot less wiggle room because you're so over leveraged because you bought into this, no money down business idea. I see that fail far more often than someone who's responsibly buying a business with an appropriate amount of equity, an appropriate amount of debt, the right background, the right experience, the right operations. And it's not to say the operator has to be there, 50 hours a week, but it becomes a challenge when you buy a business over leveraged in a state that you don't live in an industry that you don't know, because one wrong move and you don't really know about it until it's far too late and it's a disaster. It's no longer just a matter of making an edit or change.
That's why we have major bank, the largest SBA bank right now, doing layoffs in their acquisition lending department, because they were lending to searchers who were really smart dudes and ladies that graduated, and they're going to go look for this business, and they don't really have any technical hands-on experience. So I think if you took somebody whose hands are soft like mine and put me in an HVAC company, and I think I'm just going to manage it remotely, and they're blue-collar workers, we're seeing a lot of failure in that right now. And I think that's why these banks are really tightening up right now. And same thing, everybody caught on to like, well, you can have the seller put 5% on standby. So you come in with 5%. And now the banks are coming back and saying, look, we really want to see somebody that actually is putting down 10%, has the 10% post-close liquidity, because they were letting some really aggressive deals get done. And everything's cyclical, right, in life. We know that real estate has ebbs and flows. I'm sure as I study more of business brokerage, there's ebbs and flows of that. It's definitely on everybody's top of their tongue is, I want to own a business, which I think everybody should own a business of some sort. Like it could be a vending business.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, because you get better tax write-offs.
Exactly.
You build legacy, and so like that to me is why everybody should do it.
I don't know if you remember, but that conference that we were at together, the same conference, one of the underwriters got up and said their number one underwriting question that they're starting with is the buyer's experience. Of course, they got to have the capital, the background, but they want someone who knows what they're doing or has some at least ancillary experience. Just because you got a good, whatever it is, HVAC business, if you or I have no experience, how are we going to walk into that and have any credibility with the crew when we've never, done a single thing in that industry?
I had a guy just reach out, and he has a LOI drafted up. He wants to buy this engineering company. And his background is commercial real estate, has nothing to do with engineering. And I'm like, man, what's your transferable experience? And it's like, we're going to have to like be really, and somebody like that, if you're serious about buying it, they probably should give some ownership to a key employee to make that deal work. There's a lot of tricks to the trade, like where somebody who is more skillful as a buyer would know these things. Like, hey, I know I don't have the license. And if they came to you and said, hey, this restoration company you're listing, I want it. I know I don't have the license, but I'll bring on a qualified manager or whatever, right? And they talk the talk, and they knew that, you would be impressed with them and probably try to get them to the finish line, right? Versus somebody's like, I'll just get somebody, the seller can keep the license,
Yeah, so that goes back to the buyer box we talked about. The buyer might not be appropriate, but they can bring in some other person or some other individual that can strengthen that buyer box criteria, and all of a sudden that becomes a lot more credible, and people will get deals done.
I actually have a good idea. I think you should create a course for business buyers, because they need it.
I have one.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, it's totally free. It's a school community. There's probably 30 hours of. I go through how to find, how to analyze. I've got all sorts of calculators, tools, interviews with people who do SBA underwriting, people who do due diligence, quality of earnings, escrow services. Probably about 30 hours. And you had asked earlier about, is there room for buy-side representation?
Yeah.
That's what I'm essentially testing. Is I put together this free school community. They can go through hours and hours of content, have a bunch of tools, calculators, and then here's the biggest challenge. Unlike real estate, where you can, there is a central MLS and it's easier for a buyer's representative to kind of search through what's available. I don't think unless that gets to that point, and even then, I'm not sure that it would be worth it. But for sure, right now, it's not worth trying to represent buyers to go out and find a business. But what I've been testing, and it's working quite well so far, is I put this free school community together. I have the buyers go out and find their own deal, because that's the biggest time suck. Once they find it, then I come in and help represent them as the buyer through the transaction, but it's on them to find the right listing.
But that listing broker hardly ever co-op, so that's the problem.
That's the problem. And so they have to pay, they pay me.
Yeah, but it's quite worth it, because you make one bad mistake, buy the wrong business or not do the diligence needed, you're screwed. You're signing a guarantee on that SBA loan.
Yeah, exactly. Not only that, I try and make sure that I am saving them more in the purchase price than I'm charging them in the fee. So it ends up working out quite well for the buyers.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that, and we'll put a link below. I was really interested because I got into franchise consulting, and we do a lot of franchise startups, and we have our group has some resales, and I was like, man, I want to do brokerage just in franchise as a buy side, and then eventually do larger like M&A type of somebody wants to buy 15 tire shops and be able to build that business. I haven't created how to do it yet, but I like that, because it's like I know so many entrepreneurs that are looking for opportunities, and they like franchises, for example, and they want to. There's a lot there. So I guess going back now, I see a huge opportunity right now with people selling businesses, right? Like at some point you got to sell your business, and you're either going to be smart about it 3 or 4 years in advance. And if you're not going to get the proceeds you expect.
Yeah.
So I think this episode, let's just talk about seller. Hey, you might not be ready today, but 3-4 years down the road, you should be when should they be getting started, really? Like 4 years?
Yeah, ideally. Most people don't start that early, but if we had 3 to 5 years of really good prep runway where the financials were clean, the tax returns were clean, and someone was deliberately trying to prepare, that would be amazing. Most people don't put in that much time, so we work with what we have. But yeah, 3 to 5 years for sure.
I mean, you're going to probably get a much higher percentage basis deal. You're going to have more proceeds out of that, better offers if you do that. Like you could probably have, I mean, I don't know what the number would look like, but somebody who prepared for same business, somebody who just sold it, hey, I'm not prepared, versus somebody who took 3-year runway, they'd probably get 2 times what the other person got. Because they'd have a manager in place.
Yeah, if that. Sometimes, I'll give you an example of someone I just talked to this morning. Guy had the one guy I talked to, the business, it's not hugely profitable. They did about $1.5 million top line, but it was 5 brothers who no employees, 5 brothers. Each of them, it was a good profit margin business that they were in. They each paid themselves about $100,000, kind of Midwest, good lifestyle, been around for like 30 years. And it provided them a nice lifestyle for them and their families. But they called me, basically 4 out of the 5 are burned out, wanting to sell. There's no employees there. I had to have the hard conversation with them to say, what exactly are you going to sell? If I bring one buyer in and replace, how is that one buyer going to replace 4 of you? Well, and they were honest enough to say, well, no one can. There's all 5 of us are full time in the business. And so once we factored in, okay, the buyer's not going to buy this business and try and learn the industry, the culture, the customers, the vendor relationships, while at the same time hiring and training 4 employees to replace all of you guys. And so we had to have a hard conversation to say, you guys really don't have much of a sellable business at all. The only 2 options they had was either liquidation, asset value, which is one option, better than nothing, or we tried to, and this is what we're in the middle of doing, we're going to try and back into the financials, figure out what it would cost to replace the owners with fair market value of the employees, and do a very small down payment, and the rest is going to be on an earnout. So they risk their entire, that is their retirement for the most part. their entire retirement is dependent on someone else coming in and being able to operate this business no longer as a family business or a family going concern, but an actual business hiring employees, and they're going to not get paid out unless the business can profitably transfer to someone else, and they'll get paid a percentage of it. That was about the only options they had.
Yeah. What do you think, out of a percentage basis of the businesses you sell, how many of them would never go SBA? Like, is that 70% of businesses, or like just they have declining revenue? It's probably not going to be. It's got to be some kind of seller cash deal versus like actual really.
Probably about 50%. And mine might be higher because I'll do smaller listings. But probably about 50% aren't going to qualify. Not necessarily, and I'll tell you the number one biggest factor isn't because the business was bad or is declining. It's because, for lack of a better word, the seller was dishonest on their tax returns. The tax returns don't indicate what is really happening. I mean, I can't tell you see this all the time.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many sellers I show up and sometimes I meet them at their house and they have a decent house. And there's a boat on the side yard and there's a Tesla in the front yard. And I look at their tax returns and they're like, even with the adjustments and the add backs, I'm like, what's happening here? Something doesn't add up. And because they haven't reported all the income, or they're stuffing so many personal expenses through the business in a way that we can't adjust or add back, and they just kill themselves on the ability to then go and get SBA financing. It's not to say the business is not sellable, but it's not going to get the market value that it should if they were able to get SBA financing. So we have to look at seller financing, the right deal structure. Sometimes we have to look at earnouts and go outside of the SBA.
So if that same person 3 years prior would have came to you and said, okay, well, you could sell this business maybe and get $800,000 for this business today, but if they would have 3 years ago started backing out those personal expenses, now they had 2 years of real actuals, and they would have bite the bullet and paid tax those 2 years or whatever, they would have probably got a much higher return. So
yeah,
you got to be strategic.
And think about the math on this. I don't think a lot of sellers really think through logically the damage it does when they underreport or they hide a bunch of personal expenses. Let's say someone, for whatever, underreported or put a bunch of personal expenses to the tune of $100,000 on their tax returns. And let's say they're at a 28% tax bracket. They saved $28,000 on taxes. And that's what they look at. But what they don't look at is the flip side, that if that business was sold for a 3.5 multiple, that $28,000 they saved on taxes cost them $350,000 in the valuation. And they just don't know how valuations work. They don't think through. They're so focused on minimizing taxes. They don't realize they're killing their valuation down the road.
Do you know anybody that, I haven't really met somebody that does this personally, but I would imagine there's people out there that are going in and buying businesses like this, and their model is like more of a flipping model where they'll come in 3 years, get the financials where they should be. Do you have any of your clients that you work with, or do you know people like that? That seems like a good opportunity that might not be talked about as much.
Yeah, I've got 3 guys in mind who do this. One of them used to be a business broker, and he knows like the auto mechanic, auto repair. He buys these like Midas businesses, most of them undervalued, and turns around. He bought one. This was 6 or 7 years ago. He bought one for like $115,000, was underperforming, losing money. He knew it had the right location. He knew the industry well enough. Again, it goes back to the right buyer box. Turned around, bought it, operated it for 2 years, sold it for $450,000. In that sense, he flipped it. There's 2 other guys, actually both of them here in town. Well, one of them has since moved away, but do the same exact thing, except for they don't flip. They buy and hold. And they've got a really interesting strategy. So rather than identifying the business first, they identify the operator. And what they do is they operate. I've done a bunch of transactions with both of these guys. What they'll do is they will find the right operator that's got the right skill set and whatever else they're looking for the operation guy that's trustworthy and capable and competent and all that type of stuff. and he will match their current salary for wherever they're working. Because most of these guys are W-2, working somewhere else. He says he'll match their salary. He first finds the operator, then he finds a business to place them in. He puts them in as the operator, and he gives them a quarterly profit share plus matching salary. So they've got a matching salary plus 25, plus a percentage. I don't know what his percentage always is, every single quarter of the profits. And both of these guys, and they'll put up the down payment for the buyer. So yeah, you might get to the point where, it's the operator might say they're getting into a business with no money down, but they're not really the owner. The buyer is putting up the down payment, but the operator is personally guaranteeing the SBA loan. So he gives them, they stay on as a minority ownership. They put up the down payment. And I know one of the guys has a 4-to-1 payback ratio. So whatever he puts up on the down payment, out of all of the profit, he gets 100% of the profit. Besides their matching salary, he gets 100% of the profit until he's been paid back 4 times what his down payment was. And then they've got some sort of equity split between them. And he's done that multiple businesses.
We just did that, actually. And that's the business model where I have 5 guys in my mastermind group. There's 900 guys, but 5 of them we've partnered, and that's our thesis.
Yeah.
Just like that. We just did one small deal on a talent grout. I like that business model. The business we bought couldn't get SBA financing. It just never grew and had declining revenue, but we're doing really well since we took it over. So we just created a landing page for it, website, because I can go out to my SBA network. And that's the key, is the operator. We want somebody to sign. The one thing I'm worried about, though, is if I do like 20 or 30 of these and my name's, even though I'm a minority owner, SBA is tracking that now. I don't know if you heard the conversation.
I did hear.
So like if one default, I wouldn't be able to do an SBA loan broker potentially. Like that kind of scares me. But I do think that's a tremendous opportunity.
It may be a short-term kind of loophole. Eventually, as that model becomes more and more popular, I'm sure the SBA will kind of put some sort of a limit on it.
Yeah, I mean that to me is it could be a gold mine.
Yeah,
and I love that. And whoever's watching that, it's a great way for an operator to build equity. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many people that want to own a business. I just don't have the means.
Yeah,
I mean. Just imagine if you're making $50,000 a year W-2, living in Las Vegas as the prices go up. It's hard to get, it's hard to like break out into financial freedom, right?
Yeah.
And like this is the way to owning a business. But you're right, going back to what you said, a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm just going to have the GM in place and, I have no worries in the world. Mm-hmm. We all know that's not the case. You got to spend a couple of years becoming a good operator, and then you could start pulling yourself out.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to say, as earlier, you can't be absentee. You just can't be absentee from day one. You can grow yourself out, but you do it responsibly after knowing the industry well enough to know the KPIs to be able to track when there's problems with it.
And you probably see a lot of horror stories, meaning somebody might have started or bought a business years back, and like the thing has just been a money suck for them, and now they're like have to get out, right? Mm-hmm. And like they're fire selling, So it's not a lot of people in the franchise space, right? During COVID, they're like, hey, let's open this cookie franchise, and I live in LA, but I'm gonna open it in Vegas, and then all of a sudden, they're selling it for $500,000 less than they put into the thing.
Yeah, those ones are tough. The franchise, I see it often in the franchise model because there's so much startup cost with the franchise, the other fees, but the biggest is they spend $300,000-$400,000 on leasehold improvements. They go into debt for it. They essentially are developing the landlord's property. That doesn't factor into a huge amount when you're selling a business because you can't transfer the leasehold improvements to a buyer, and so they're into this thing $400,000 or $500,000, and the franchise is making $40,000 profit a year. It's not enough to really get anyone excited to come in and be an owner-operator, but it's also not anywhere near valued enough to pay off their SBA. They're upside down.
Yeah.
So it becomes a real problem.
That's why I don't do a lot of brick and mortar. I do home service and B2B because low startup costs, quicker ramp up, a lot lighter lift. If you're getting into your first business, why would you do a $1 million build out on some,
crazy.
like everybody's getting into pickleball courts and franchises now, or the golf simulators, right?
Yeah.
They're going up everywhere. At some point, they're going to be saturated, right? And nobody's going to come pay your membership.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful about what these types of businesses. That is the appeal of buying an existing business. But also, I think a mom and pop business, if you don't buy right and you don't know what you're getting into, you can get into a lot of trouble because, like, if you don't know the industry, what we're talking about, what do you think the biggest opportunities over the next 5 or 10 years are going to be for both buyers and sellers? Like, do you see any trends that are any different than the past, or where do you see this industry going in general?
I think it's going to continue to grow. There's so many people, just demographics, retiring that happen to own businesses that it's not going to slow down. I think the real opportunity is really what we've already talked about. Buying at a responsible debt level in an industry and building systems, process, procedure to kind of work yourself out of it, and then buying it, doing it again, and having multiple businesses. You just can't do it overnight. Or the model we just barely talked about, where if you have a bunch of capital, you're fronting the down payment, you're having someone else be the owner, operator, and the personal guarantor of the business, and having multiple businesses. I think that's the real opportunity.
Does that appeal to you as an investor?
When I first got into doing this, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna build up, a bunch of. We were at the time buying all cash single family rental properties, and so my thought was, okay, we'll pay off our own house, and I'll buy 10 properties and I'll pay cash for them. Once I get to 10 properties that are all paid for, I'll start buying businesses. We since paid off our house. We passed 10. I think we're at like 25 or 26 properties that are all paid for. And I have not yet I haven't found it appealing enough to go out and buy a business because my quality of life now is so good as working from home with my assistant, no lease, no overhead, no debt, no payments, that I haven't really wanted to go out and actually buy a business to operate it.
So at your age right now, you've kind of you've won the financial game, right? Like, what keeps you motivated? Because you don't really need to do anything anymore if you didn't want to.
Yeah, when we sold our second business, we were in a position where I could have really slowed down, and I did for a little while. That's why I didn't immediately go into business brokering. I mentioned before it took me a little while. I had read the Tim Ferriss book, The 4-Hour Work Week. I read that and at the time that was super popular, and I thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm in a position where I think we could do it. And you know what happened after about 4 or 5 days? I wanted to shoot myself. I was so bored. I had nothing on my calendar, nothing on my to-do list. And here's the part, at least for me, this is just the way I'm built. Not everyone's like this. But for me, the thing that book missed was the sense of purpose, the sense of fulfillment for actually contributing to society instead of just sitting around and laying out by the pool and playing golf all day. I had no fulfillment in that. And so I love staying busy, not because, of course, I like to be compensated for it, but I love staying busy for the sense of doing something, the sense of, and it's one of the reasons I haven't always just moved up to. A lot of business brokers kind of get more experience and move up in bigger deals. And of course, I do some bigger deals, but I still like the smaller deals because the sense of accomplishment and satisfaction when I close on a small one is just as big as some of the bigger ones. I enjoy that. I enjoy impacting people's lives and seeing someone we talked about had a $50,000 salary that bought into a business and now is doubling their salary, building in equity and paying down debt, and it changes their life. I enjoy seeing that. And so I'm just built that way that I probably won't retire, not because I couldn't.
You love what you do.
Yeah.
You love helping people, and you love the art of the deal.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the most successful people are the same way, meaning they're like, what would I do? Like, this is part of my lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
I like helping people, and I like helping people, and there's so many people that just don't know enough to if they were just educated, like what you're doing in your school community, you're just educating people. Just like that one business that they buy will change their freaking life.
Yeah,
and it's just, You have it all in here, right? We could this is the steps you take.
Yeah.
And then you own a business. And like we could change people's destiny. Because I think, being one of the richest countries, if not the richest country in the world, it's sad driving around here in Vegas and seeing all these homeless people. It's like there's so much opportunity, but I think it's not Main Street. People don't understand it, right? Nobody teaches you how to buy a business, run a business. So I think that will become a much bigger thing. Like you're right, that the next 10 years, people are going to catch on and say, I gotta.
And it is catching on in some of the colleges that have the ETA programs. I know BYU has one, Wharton has one, Harvard has one. There's a couple. I think that will continue to catch on to teach people how to do exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, we got you coming back June 6th for the Real Estate and Business Expo.
Yeah.
It'll be yourself and then Michael Zuber, who wrote a book called One Rental at a Time. And he was able to retire at 45 and then he was bored.
Yeah.
And then he wrote the book One Rental at a Time. And then he created a YouTube community. So it'll be fun because we can talk business brokerage, but we can also talk real estate and what you've done. And
I assume I kind of followed his model. Just we pay cash, one rental at a time.
Yeah.
Save up, pay cash for another one, just one at a time.
Yeah. I mean, I think not as many people can do the cash thing. Most of us have to lever up and get mortgages. But I mean, if you could pay cash, that's a good thing too, right? Because there's no worries then. Yeah. But anyways, thank you for the time today. I'd love to have you back and deep dive on,
we'll do it.
The sales, these deals and so much more. So thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.